Hello, hi everyone. Okay, I believe everyone's having a good time at home. Okay, so I believe that we have a nice poll going down below this description. Could you please participate in that poll? We would like to know how many of you have actually tried the famous coffee at this point in time. I think everyone's talking about it on social media at least. Anybody who's not very familiar with it, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Is it clear to everyone? This is the kind of coffee that I've been discussing. Okay, so I think let's get started. We'll try our level best to make this discussion a little more productive based on subject math where everyone finds it a little boring. So I thought let us add some fun to it. The first part was talking about this coffee that everyone's. Have you all tried this by anyone? I'd like to know a bit more responses for all those who are here. Well, we've got a majority of them no. Uh, Let me share a basic example of mine. A few days back, when I tried making this is what I made, but this is what exactly it should have been, and this was because of not putting the right ingredients all together, while this is with the right ingredients. So, this is exactly why we need to use ratios in the most important part. Well, those who haven't tried, you can go and Google it. It's something very interesting. Even I was not too sure if I would be able to make it in the first place. But, well, after a few attempts and after getting the ratio absolutely correct, I managed to get it. Well, so starting today's discussion, I believe that everyone's very keen on discussing about how math could be creative sitting at home. What we're going to do is we're going to try and answer as many questions as possible, but at the same time, I'd like to share a few experiences. The other day, a cousin of mine had called up and he was saying that he was looking at some Venn diagrams which his teacher had given him to practice at home, and he wasn't really understanding how things were going in sets and Venn diagrams. So we were having a discussion, and thanks to our technology we were having a basic chat. While having a chat, we identified that he was not able to understand the basic idea of what sets was altogether. So what we said was that I told him, go sit down with your mom, make a list of channels that she is fond of, because of course everyone's watching TV these days. And well, I think a lot of people, I'm sorry to interrupt, but a lot of people have started joining in. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm sorry if I missed a few messages earlier, but yeah, so Jaya ma'am, yes, I will definitely teach you how to make this coffee. I'll make sure that it becomes interesting too. But yeah, um, anyway, so talking about the idea of my cousin sitting with his mother and his father and his grandfather, he made a list of channels that each one of them could actually enjoy watching at home. After he made a list of all these channels, he started discussing it with his parents, and he started making simple blocks saying that in this, my mom likes these channels, my father likes these channels, and my grandfather likes these channels. Then he started understanding that okay, if these two people enjoy any common channels, or all three of us enjoy any common channels, and he started creating so many permutation combinations that he actually created roughly about 7 to 8 boxes, and each and every box that he created had a good amount of overlap between mother and father, father and grandfather, himself and grandfather, and stuff like that. So that was one of the important points that we started discussing with him, he started realizing that why he had to do Venn diagrams and what was the logic behind it, how did he enjoy using sets. So when we are looking at such situations, when children are sitting at home, we've got to look at various ways how we could engage with them, make sure that sorry, I will also keep interrupting and saying, hi Soma, how are you? um, I have missed a lot of other comments as well while talking. I get a little carried away while talking, please bear with me. Then we have Shakuntala ji, good afternoon. um, Pushpalata ji Gupta ji, good afternoon. Well, so talking about, thank you Jaya ma'am as usual for encouraging me for coming up with new ideas. Uh, so now when we look at the next idea, I've just been trying to spend as much time as possible looking at things at home. I'm never a person who spends a lot of time at home, but this time I've been spending a lot of time. And when we've been looking at the minutest things at home and trying to see that how math can actually be discussed with children, and the most important thing is something which children usually do in their free time, not something which they do deliberately, or they've been asked to give any curriculum or asked to complete any assignment. I would honestly say, if we were to look at math, the most important thing of looking at math is how can we make it more relevant for them. So the idea that also came up to my mind was the other day when I was trying to look at my own house. I was discussing with my mother that the kind of milk that we actually consume during these times has definitely increased a lot. So we started making a basic data analysis. We started recording the number of liters actually coming in and going out of the house. We realized that before this whole lockdown, the consumption of milk was literally, say, 1/5 of what it is at this point in time. So, that was another way of looking at how math has played an important role. I mean, in terms of variation, more the number of people right now, everyone's under a lockdown, and you see each and every child, parent, all the working members of the house are spending more time at home. So, more consumption of tea, more consumption of milk, that automatically relates to the basic understanding of variation of mathematics. Now, good afternoon to all the new joinees who've been joining us. Yeah, glad to see everyone. We are also looking at answering a few questions eventually, but I wanted to share one very good example which I feel that would be very, very helpful for all the kids. Is, let's say if as of today everyone's sitting down and watching a lot of news and spending too much time looking at the way numbers are going and the way the situation is degrading day by day. While children are looking at a lot of news, what we also want them to start doing is start drafting or learning the art of writing a math essay. So what exactly is a math essay? We want to use these essays to make them write reports about how are things going, the positive reports, the negative reports, things that are going out of hand in different parts of the world. How are they looking at the cases that are expanding in the US or in different parts of the globe, or for that example even in Europe. When they're looking at news, there's a lot of information available to kids at this point in time. We want them to structure this information, see the percentage growth day by day that is happening in India, and compare it with the others, because it's high time that we all Indians are proud of the way we are handling our situation. We have become role model in terms of the way we are combating this whole situation across the whole globe. And if we have the opportunity to do so, why not make our children proud of us? So give them an opportunity to start writing a math essay. Let them report day by day that how many times in a week they can see every week how many cases have increased, what could be the reason behind it, and do a percentage change. Now, it may sound very simple or it may sound very generic, but this actually explains them the use or importance of percentage. Now let me explain it to you. Let's say hypothetically we would have about 10 cases in the first week, and in the second week we had about, say, 15 cases. So now there's an increase of about 5 cases. That 5 cases is upon 10, not upon 15, right? So every week there is a change as the base, because every week the base is changing. So when the base is changing, you're explaining them that why percentage is important. Every week there is going to be a difference in your opinion, in a very simple reason, because your base will never remain the same, and that is why percentage is very, very important. So it's not just basic comparison, it's comparison when your base is not equal. So for example, when kids kind of have comparing child A versus child B's marks, or any kind of report that they have, it kind of makes sense that they can directly compare, but the use of percentage is very important when the base does not remain same. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a short break in terms of having discussions. We'd rather take a few more questions from those who are very fond of this subject. Let's see. Thank you a lot of people for giving acknowledging great examples. Okay, so is there any specific questions that you guys would like to ask? I mean, in terms of as teachers are running classrooms, flipped classrooms at this point in time, uh, do you face any challenge in terms of engaging with kids at this point in time, or how are you kind of giving us any assignments or anything that you'd like to see? Thanks, Raki, for sharing the image. How the virus has been spreading. That's good. That's a good link for kids to actually evaluate. Uh, well, I don't know. A few of you have met me in person. Few of you have not met me. So, well, this is my USP. Those who've known me always know that I always carry these cards with me, no matter where I am. Of course, in this lockdown, it's quite helpful. But these are the cards that you can actually play with your kids and have a lot of fun. And I'm going to give you a few examples how you can actually do this. Let's say hypothetically these are all numbered cards and they have different numbers, different colors involved in it. All you can do is you could start playing a game wherein you say a number is 25. You give a child to say pick up 5 cards and reach the number 25. You can tell them, you could play a game of odd and even. They could flip the card and decide if it's an odd or an even number. We also did one session very recently wherein we made children use these Uno cards to create an equation, wherein we gave them a certain answer, like say for example 25 or 50 or 100, and we told them that every color, so red, blue, yellow, green, each and every color on Uno card, they would have a different variable. So you would give variable red cards for A, then you could say blue cards for B, and you could have something like that. Now, when you have multiple 4 different cards, all they had to do is they had to identify that what would, if you had to put the value of A as anything in terms of 1 to -1, and together reach the number 25, 50 or 100, whatever you give, it kind of starts tickling their brains, because the idea is that if we give them any kind of assignments or worksheets, they are at home. They may not really be excited to do a worksheet when they're sitting with their parents. They love to spend time with them playing these kind of indoor games, for example playing carom board with them, and have a lot of okay, so I'll just take a quick break. We have a request that can I have an idea to give a concept through online. Well, so you could give a concept of online through using basic multiplications, uh, which is they learn from numbers and colors. Okay, just Kev, just wait for a minute. I'm just responding to the previous number. Yes, so what we're trying to say is that let's say we could try and have these cards. We could tell them to use multiplication. You have different colors of number 2, red, blue, yellow, green. Tell them to accumulate as many number of 2 in a given period of time, and then tell them to add them. Forcefully make them add. Do not make them do repeated addition. Why? Let's say they have 2 plus 2, they have to make it 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. When they continuously do this, they get exhausted, and then they say that there's 1 2 3 4 5 6 cards. Why not just do 6 into 2 is going to give me 12? Make kids realize that multiplication is not just to multiply or just to put a certain number. It's actually important for all the teachers or for all the educators to understand that children need a reason as of today. They just don't need something for because there's a paper or there is an important idea. Preeti ma'am, you also needed an idea for an online class. I'll come back to you guys on that a little bit. We missed there was another question which I missed, I guess, over there. Okay. So yes, so talking about an online session, also if you want, you could use Carom board. There's a lot of apps that are available online when you're playing with your kids. I've been a fond player, in actually using Carom board in terms of angles and everything. Chaitali ma'am, thank you. We can use Uno to play substitution. Use it in a Venn diagram. Very good idea. I think that's exactly what we are trying to get. Wonderful, Rupali ma'am, thank you. I think that credit is for Chaitali ma'am, not for me. So, okay. Now, why don't we come up with some more ideas? Maybe some games, if you can suggest that children are very fond of, or everyone is playing at home. We could come up with some ideas on that as well. Any suggestion? Any game that you think that children are usually going to be playing? Okay, fine. So we'll take all the questions towards the end. So we'll continue with discussing a few more ideas. Okay, now talking about having children usually sitting at home. Most of the children or most of the kids kind of have a difficulty when it comes to geometry or looking at shapes. So what we'd really like to do is we'd like to give, you could tell all your children or your known ones to sit down with their parents and draw an entire floor plan. Now, while we are drawing a floor plan, what we exactly do is we make them understand there are how many rectangles, how many squares in the whole house, and then after that we start moving on to making them draw the right angles. Where exactly can we guys, thank you so much, keep adding up the games. I'll be looking at it and I'll be discussing of that as and when we speak. So we're going to be using these floor plans in order to make sure that these children understand at which point certain rooms meet at right angles, certain places will be having different angles. How do you identify the carpet area of the house? They have all the time. They can spend some time with their parents, start measuring every corner, and definitely spend the whole day in actually developing a floor plan. Now, when each of them actually do an inspection of their own house, and then they start discussing it with their children once they come back to school, it's definitely going to add a lot of value. Now, I see that there are a lot of games that are coming up, a lot of options. Now, in all these board games that we look at it, okay, there is a request. I will be discussing all the requests a little later. Fine. Okay. Yeah, so geometry we'll be discussing a little after a little while once we finish this part. Now, okay, I'm just trying to get all the info, all the games at one point in time right now. Okay, interesting. Fine, so I think we have a lot of games, a lot of options that we've come up with. Opening and closing of doors to explain angles, wonderful. Live game where we have a brilliant. I mean, imagine if the kind of math that we can actually teach while we're just sitting at home. You all have kind of started figuring out. Yes, so we have a different type of sets with household articles. Wonderful, Preeti ma'am. I also would suggest that if at all we could think of utilizing our making children do an analysis of which sectors or which businesses have actually done very well. I mean, uh, who would have made the most money in such a situation, or which all sectors have actually lost through this whole dilemma, and they kind of can do a case study on that as well. Uh, Mehak is saying they can learn angles through dough. Uh, that's an exciting idea of using angles with the help of dough. We have a lot of chess is coming up as a good option. Um, okay, great. Okay, so now The main point for today's session is just to see how we can use creative mathematics while we are at home, making children get an idea how to look at math in every aspect of their household, and also understand that maths is not only about solving sums at home. Then we have an option, angles with clay and 3D shapes in craft. Wonderful. Straightening and contracting arms. Well, I remember when I was kind of using a few utensils for the first time, and trying, what angle do you open? You have a holder in the kitchen, so what angle do you open and close? That's an excellent idea. Yes, case studies are very important because most of the kids usually face trouble in word problems and in interpreting what this word problem is all about. So it's very, very important for kids, parents, and teachers to try and relate as much as real life approach to it. We also saw the other day that when kids were trying to stand in front of a shop, or there were parents who were standing in front of a shop, the kind of distance they were maintaining between two people was kind of very, very interesting. We needed to see the kind of social distancing. I believe by the end of this whole period, every child would know what is the meaning of one arm distance and what would it exactly really mean. So yes, that's another thing. Hi Dipti, glad to see you online. Yes, watching TV, check which angle would be best to watch the show. Well, that's what I did when I was setting up my camera before speaking to all of you guys. I believe all of you are actually holding your phones, your devices at a certain angle. We could actually give kids, cooking number ratio. Well, ratio is something which we started off during that Dalgona coffee, and like I said, the when I started making Dalgona coffee in the beginning, it was very, very difficult for me. But when I put the right ratio, things became quite interesting for me. How to make the study of logarithms chapter easy and interesting. Well, the chapter of logarithms is purely going to be based on how we are looking at the current scenario. The estimate in terms of the number of affected people, and comparing that with the kind of hospitality, sorry, not hospitality, the right equipment, the medical equipments that we actually have, building a relationship in terms of what kind of life expectancy can we achieve for people, those who don't have a very strong immune system. It's definitely helping. That's the whole logarithm that is being used, and that's the basis on how all the estimation has been created. The estimate of locking down a country for about 21 days also came on from that. Well, I know that everyone's keen on asking questions, but we'll keep addressing as many as we can. Okay, so when we are making children study math during this time, it is very important that most of the kids, let them do their real life practice, let them be a part of the household decisions, like how Chaitali ma'am mentioned, washing your vessels, number of vessels washed, time and water used. Yes, that's a fabulous example. The kind of water that is being consumed. Well, I've started doing dishes, and I've learned the amount of water I would waste initially. I'm trying to reduce that, and that's how you start making children all the more careful about how they are looking at the environment. We also have a basic way. I was talking about a math essay. I think it's very important that children must write down their observations in terms of numbers at least once in a day for about 5 to 7 minutes. Once children start writing that, that's the only time when they are in a position to explain or express what they're learning or their understanding about a particular idea is very important. Exercise, dance, yes, it's a very way of form of making them learn how many counts are there in every exercise, and how many steps you can do in a dance. That's another good way. I was going about how you can make them write a math essay. It's not going to happen overnight, so be prepared that your child may write maybe 1 or 2 lines initially when they start. Now, what exactly are they going to do in this math essay? The whole point of writing an essay is to explain, or trying to try and just not write down things which is not relevant in terms of math, but try to predict things based on numbers. How many plants have we watered? How much water have we given to plants? How much time have we spent on TV? How much time have we spent learning something or reading a book? Trying to get a new spend some new skill set with your parents, or try to work by work with your parents, try to discuss with them that how are they going to be, why is the government taking a 21-day lockdown, what's the logic behind it, what could be the possibility, start estimating that if at all things continue in a particular manner, what would be the most important necessities for a family. Preeti ma'am has mentioned that they can practice measurement of capacity, weight, length by measuring different stuffs. Yes, excellent. That's exactly what to be done. Miller has mentioned watering plants. Yes, the correct number of water required. Gardening in the house. I'm sure a lot of you are very fond of gardening, and kids are going to get this chance to learn how to garden at this point of time. I mean, can you imagine? It's been not even like say 25 minutes, and the amount of discussion we have done on math is immense. I really appreciate all of you start looking at it, but this can only and only happen when you start looking at math from a language perspective and not just from a sum perspective. So that's why I've been stressing a lot about a math essay. Another important concept in terms of math that we want to discuss in this session is going to be based on math investigation. Uh, the idea of math investigation is something which we allow, children should start in focusing on various facts. Like let's say some repair, wear and tear. At this point in time, everyone's managing uh, all their households by themselves. If there's any breakage or any wear and tear to be done, we will have to give them an idea how can they fix things at home. I think what we really lack in terms of skill set is to giving them an idea that okay, this is a leaking tap and this is how you need to fix it. Otherwise they have to guess or they have to investigate if this tap which is leaking would not be repaired, what would be the amount of water that would actually be wasted in the whole day's time. I remember somebody talking a very important campaign on a couple of news channels that before this whole chaos had started. There was this NGO who was saving millions and millions of liters all throughout, and while they were doing that, it just got me to thinking that if I as an individual would start thinking, and if my tap would have been leaking, at what rate uh, at what rate would you consider, at what speed is that water falling, how fast does the water really fill, what's the amount that actually is going to get filled. So all of that kind of starts giving them a simple example that okay, this is how math is actually being used. uh, Apart from this, what we've also observed is that when you are giving them assignments, let's say there was a reason why the Olympics had to be pushed in the next year. Well, the Olympics were not supposed to start in the next month, it was supposed to start after a few months from now. But there has to be a process. There were a couple of tryouts, a couple of other procedures had to be done, which of course got pushed. So let them start investigating what led to one situation to the other. So only and only when children see things which are happening in their real life, this is an unusual situation, and I completely get it that it's not very easy for all of us to sit back at home and not know or to do anything. So I read a couple of posts when people said that if this is a time when you need to up your skill sets and try to reflect back, believe me, it's this is a time that we usually can learn so much, because everything, there's no servants, there aren't any other help available for you. Everything has to be done by yourself, and if a child gets that kind of an exposure, it's as good as they're living in a hostel wherein they have to deal with a situation, limited resources, and they need to ensure the whole family is eating well. Now, apart from this, we've also I'm going to share a few more personal examples that let's say if I was there, I did this estimation project with one of the schools recently. I told them that let's say if we were a society, children were told to identify what would be the cost of a one-time meal for the entire family with bare necessity, making sure that everyone gets the right kind of food. With this, estimate how many houses were there in the whole society, and see if the government had to adopt this society for some reason, what would be the actual cost required. So this whole idea would actually be counted as a use of algebraic expressions, wherein they are creating a simple expression or a basic equation wherein saying that this is what you really need to achieve at the end of it, this is what you need to, this is your end target, these are the number of variables. That's the most important part. As long as children are sensitized towards uh, all these situations, it is very important. Sangeeta ji, thank you so much. Visiting the bank, observing the withdrawal of cash, check deposit is definitely a very good idea. I think at this point of time, giving them an opportunity to see what is online banking would be a better idea, because that's the best way to keep them safe. Um, Measuring tiles and calculating the cost of tiling a room, I think that is something which is the need of the hour, because everyone has that time and they would love to do that. Thanks Soma Mukherjee for that wonderful idea. We also wanted to share the possibility of trying to get these children try and understand if at all they were to revamp the whole house. Just I think a few minutes ago somebody mentioned that if they were to redo the entire house, what would it be? Or for that matter, you could also say fixation of the whole house, wherever the certain parts are spoiled or needs repairs, they need some support, so they start identifying, okay, this is the kind of budget which should be kept aside for this part of the house, and stuff like that. Now I think we will move down to another aspect where we had a few requests earlier. There were two very specific requests. The one was about different games, and one was about profit and loss, other using other commercial math, while the other was also based on your, the use of geometry. Now, using of geometry, the most important part, I mean, at least I have felt that when I go to the kitchen now, which is a very rare case at this point of time, but now it's every hour an issue. I go there, I keep rearranging all the dabbas, all the boxes, just to make sure that can I try to fit in more and more of it. And believe me, every time I use the concept of area of circles or squares, and I try to change the way it is actually positioned, I'm in a position to put in more number of boxes. So that kind of helps. Apart from that, yes, we'll come to the games aspect a little later. While we are looking at I'm just going back to the older references. Zainab, you also mentioned about buying groceries. That's another point which I missed out speaking to everyone about, how getting groceries at this point in time is a very important part. So you do not want to get excessive groceries. You do not want to get over. You don't want to buy less for your family. So that kind of estimation kind of becomes very helpful. That's definitely an important part. We go back to the geometry aspect. Now, in geometry, we spoke about angles. Now we'll talk about an important part which we did mention about parallel lines. Now, in our house, we have a lot of objects which would have parallel lines. It's very important for us to know that why are these lines parallel. Like for example, if you can see behind me, I have a wardrobe. It needed to have parallel lines. If it wouldn't have parallel lines, it wouldn't open properly. So they can start investigating this aspect. I think we had a very good example just now of investigating weight, price of food packets. It's like basically instead of giving them a packet which has the weight mentioned on it, you turn it upside down, tell them to weigh it, and tell them to guess what exactly would be the weight of it. And if they give a correct answer, you can reward them with something at home. So it just gives them an idea about building their skill sets in terms of estimation. Um, well, we have Sangeeta ji giving us an example of Pythagoras theorem in building bridges, that we have give the real example and application. Now, Sangeeta ji, your Pythagoras theorem example is excellent. More importantly, when we use the Pythagoras theorem, we can kind of relate a small example of trigonometry as well, and we use the idea of CCTV cameras. We could ask children, Archana ji, I'll just join. I will mention to you in a few minutes. I was talking about the Pythagoras theorem and the use of trigonometry, wherein all these CCTV cameras are actually there in our society or in our building. And if at all these angles would have been changed, and if the calculations would have been changed, we can actually reduce the number of CCTV cameras, or we would need to assess more number of CCTV cameras to ensure that we have enough coverage for the entire building. Uh, we go back to Archana ji's question, time interval at home. Now, say for example, there is a certain gap between every meal or every activity at home, so based on every household. So if we could tell children to identify the minute they wake up in the morning, if they're attending any sessions, so from that time to that time, how long does it take, how long are they actually attending, and they start recording those things. A child can make a log sheet of his daily activities, because now a child can be at home the whole day with a timer in his hand, and they can start writing down approximately from this time to this time I was taking a short nap, I did cover, I had a meal, and certain points, we certain amount of time I went out and helped my mom, or I was doing any household chores, so it kind of helps over there. Okay, now what we're also going to do is, we'll go to some other questions now. We've discussed a few ideas, but we would like to see some of your questions. If in case you have anything, please go ahead. We'd like to hear from you and start answering them as well. Have I missed out anything? Please reiterate it out here. This Punjabi has said banking games. Okay, calculate time interval while drinking water. Can you play? Okay, so can you play minute games with students for time management? We could actually give them a task. Let's say, for example, Uno cards, Jenga blocks. You have to tell them to build a block, build a tower, or play some amount of game with any of these household games. But tell them that they have to try and complete that task in 1 minute, which they need to guess that when 1 minute will actually come to an end. It is very, very important. If they are able to estimate that, it becomes a little more easier for them on that basis. Reshma ji, your activities for decimals would involve, there are two things that could be done. One would be investigation and one would be playing a game. So from investigation point of view, every bottle, every packet of chips, or every packet that they have at home, they could look at that entirely and start identifying that in a packet of chips, how much carbohydrates are they having, how much fat are they having, how many of them are necessary, how many of them are unnecessary, making them realize the importance of junk food and how you should avoid them, and also making it a point that you should try and avoid these things, because you're giving them an idea to, I mean, if there's about 50 grams of chips, how much are you actually putting in fats and carbohydrates. Talking about maybe how can we go in terms of a game for playing decimals. You could play, if you have a dartboard at home, or you may have a few Jenga blocks, or you could have anything which you can aim at. Each and every Jenga block or any particular object that you have, you could start putting them with a value of 0.5 or 0.25. Take a soft ball and aim at it and try and get a certain number of value out of it. Well, you'll have to be participative with your kid. It's an offline game. You'll have to make them count every now and then, or convert it into a decimal. That should allow you to do that. Nirali, you have a question. How to explain number line to students with a small activity? Well, to play a number line, the most easiest thing is to actually take up any object which would be maybe a strong line, or anything that you have, or maybe a thread, and put a midpoint. You could start telling them that this is a place where you start with a 0. Now they could roll a dice, and whatever the number comes, let's say when number 3 comes, they need to start skipping 1, 2, 3 in a particular direction. If at all they have, you can use two different dices. One could be red, one could be another color. One dice could be for positive and one could be for negative. So every time you roll a positive dice, it goes in the positive direction. Then next comes a negative, then they have to go back and forth. That gives them an idea how to use a number line. Then yeah, we can use a tape on the floor as well. You can use pista shells, absolutely. We can use fractions, biscuits. Yes, we could use that, absolutely. In fact, we could use, let's say for example, we have a bottle of water. We could keep asking them what fraction of water have they actually utilized. So this is like, say, 1/10 of the whole bottle is almost over. So something on those lines could also be done. Okay. Any other topic that we have missed out over here? Staircase for ascending and descending. Yes, that's a good idea. Monopoly game could be used for learners in touch with profit and loss. So, well, Lakshmi, it's a fabulous game that you could play Monopoly, and kids would always love that in terms of so at what money have they actually started and how much money do they have towards the end. They can identify their profit and loss, and that becomes kind of exciting for them as well. For those who are who may have a dartboard or may have a carom board at home, you can play a similar game for doing profit and loss. It's a very simple idea. All you have to do is you have to tell them that two players are playing a carom board. Each player has got X amount of money to play. You need to strike three strikes, and the white coin and the black coin would have certain values. Let's say if I have 100 rupees, and if I'm striking, I'm paying 10 rupees for every strike. Every white coin would give me 20 rupees, and every black coin would give me 5 rupees. And we could actually start collecting as much money as we can every time we strike on the coins. So this would give them a very important way of playing a game, and at the same time also making them understand that how they can actually lose money or make money. Um, for fraction, we can use pizza. Yes, homemade pizzas is the only alternative which we can look at this point in time. Um, Business game, yes. Backward forward counting also is very good in ascending and descending. While ascending and descending, it just struck me, we were initially talking about TV channels. Why not look at that? So maybe you've already identified all my favorite TV channels, put them in ascending and descending, and when you use the remote control, you can actually see that moving that in forward and backward, this thing. Neha, can you suggest some apps that can be used for math activities? Well, we'll be sharing a couple of links for you at a later time so that you can uh, refer to that. For Ludo game, yes, we could try and use that for fractions. That's a good idea. We can tell the word problems like story sums. Problems, um I would prefer that we say, it's more of a real life situation. So if we, rather than giving them word problems, I would say it's rather better that we make them create a word problem based on the current scenario and let them find the solution for it. That would be like that's the part of the math essay. Um can you suggest about compound interest? Well, now about compound interest, what we could tell them right now, everyone is digging into their financial stability, and if parents sit down with their children and they could discuss with them that, you know what, we may need to rearrange our finances and show them through online banking. It's very easy to open a fixed deposit or a recurring account. Let them identify which bank their parents should invest their money in terms of compounding interest, and when they will be able, or they could use apps where they could calculate the interest calculator. When they start using that, they are in a better position to identify that, okay, can I spend more time, should I invest more of my money with Axis Bank or with HDFC Bank or with XYZ another bank, whatever it may be. But it just gives them an important way of real life application. um, okay, some example on number names. Now number names, I think the example would be, the most easiest way would be to use TV channels, or to use Uno cards, or to use I mean, people have started using Tambola very frequently at this point of time. Everyone's playing this game. In fact, the other day I saw people are using WhatsApp to play family Tambola, and it was quite interesting to see how things were going over there. For fraction, we can use fruits too. Yes, we are all having fruits, so there's a lot of use of fractions over there. Um, Yes, so Zainab, you've mentioned for simple and compound interest, we can arrange a theme activity of a bank. If you're looking at this current situation, uh, but I would suggest that using online banking as a tool, it would give them an idea how exactly we can actually use it. How can we make teaching Roman numbers fun? Well, if you could use ice cream sticks, Jenga blocks, or any straight lines you could use, you can try and tell them to create numbers. Each day they have to move, say, 10 numbers out of, with the help of certain number of sticks only. So they can start creating that, or they could use rubber bands to create, or using a geoboard they could try. But again, I don't see many children having geoboards at home, so it may get difficult to use that. But at least with the help of matchsticks or ice cream sticks or anything which is available at home, they could start creating those numbers. But let them do 10 numbers a day. Let us not make them rush through in order to complete 1000, 2000 numbers at any given point of time. How can we make teaching Roman numbers? Yes, that's exactly what I said. Trigonometry. Now, Vikas ji, talking about trigonometry, it is very important that all these kids, when they are, I give you an example of the security cameras earlier. But apart from that, if you can tell them to identify that why a tube light holds at a certain position only, and why is it not kept at the bottom? Why is your television not mentioned kept at the bottom? So that's something which is very very important, and those properties, and if at all, of course we won't move those objects down, but we could make them use that in order to identify what would be the exact angle when it is placed at the bottom, and then that would make it a little more easier. Yes, toothpicks for Roman numbers was also a brilliant idea. For Vedic mathematics, that's another concept altogether. I think we can look at some other websites for that. Well, subtracting sums in a simple way. Good question, Mehek Khan. We will be looking at. Do you remember, if anybody has Jenga blocks with them, what we would say is we could use a dice. We just did it a few days back. We had a child having 10 to 15 Jenga blocks. We had those blocks. We rolled the dice. There were two types of dices. One would be adding and one would be subtracting, like a positive negative number. Every time they would add or they would roll the dice, then those blocks would be removed or put back. So that would allow them to understand the basics of subtraction. Talking about how we could do subtraction based on carry forward, that is going to be a little more longer process, and if that's something which everybody needs, we will try to create a separate video for that and give that to you out. So okay, we have another question: to learn formula easily and remember for a long time. Now, the problem of formula is basically children are not able to relate the whole purpose of a formula is to build relationships between one number and the other number. So, and that's only and only possible when you make them understand that what relationship can these two numbers be actually equated, and that's possible when you say, if this is number 7 and this is number 2, so what is the possibility of 2 becoming 2 and 7? How do you equate it? Either you can add 5 over here or you can subtract 5 over here. So at any given point of time, there is a missing number between these two cards, and that is what they need to start predicting. So if at all they can start using that, and the missing value, that will be x. So there are two expressions: 7 minus 5, that's one expression, equals to 2. 2 plus 5 makes another expression altogether. We have an example. Okay, exponents and powers. Now exponents and powers is also an interesting game which can be played. Keeping in mind the real life situation, we can make them understand at what rate is are these cases increasing or spreading across the globe. That could be one example. Another thing could be when you're playing a game at home, in terms of you could either create one or you could use an existing dartboard, and while aiming at the dartboard, there are different colors on a dartboard. You'll have red, blue, green, black. So every time you hit on a dartboard and you hit a particular number, that number raised to a certain power would actually relate to have multiply getting the actual answer. That could be another way of teaching exponents and powers. Multiplication tricks with the help of Vedic mathematics. For Vedic mathematics, we will be sharing a few links at a later time. So Nirmala ji, we can suggest a few apps. Yes, we will make a note of that. All those links, I think we'll make sure that is shared at the end of the session. Manju Oja ji, expressions. Okay, so for expressions, we would really like to use Tambola game. When you're looking at a Tambola game, you can pick out any two numbers and you can try and create an expression using them. That how are you going to connect these two numbers? Is there a way that you could multiply a number to reach there, or it could be by dividing a number to reach there, or to add a number and reach there? Whatever the number of times the different types of ideas you can actually generate would make it a little more interesting for them. Well, we'll go back to the other questions. Are there any other questions as such? Okay. Well, I think we have covered most of the questions so far. If at all there's anything else, start putting how to teach time for kindergarten. Well, this is a time when we are looking at, when you're looking at children at such a lower grade, you are looking at them to, constantly take them out, have a clock, trying to, look at the time, at what time are they actually going to be having their food. And like we could do the recording for the earlier time we mentioned, they could try and use that a little more easier for them. Can you suggest learning tables? Well, learning tables could be a very interesting way. If you could use a table tennis bat or maybe your softball, and you could tell them to start tapping on the bat, and every time they tap, they need to, we'll say with a count of 2, 4, 6, 7. They can keep practicing that. It becomes a little more easier for them to actually understand how repeated addition actually works. And we did mention about repeated addition when we discussed earlier with the help of Uno cards. That was another suggestion. Rita ji, you mentioned how can we plan an algebra session if we have an online class? Yes, we can definitely do that. When we are looking at creating an algebraic expression, we have to give them a real life situation by making them create the certain variables. So we can either pick up planning a holiday, or in such times you would rather plan creating a family package plan wherein you're trying to identify how much food is needed in the entire family based on different people's health needs or medical needs. What is the kind of emergency supplies that you actually need, and what is the kind of estimate that you really need to create, and then you could use that in order to create a proper elaborate expression. And that expression could be then utilized for every household by changing the number of people who are in the age bracket of, say, below 15, above 25, above 50. So then those variables can keep changing, and based on which your entire expression of algebra can be done. But we will be discussing about, we'll share a few more ideas later on how we could have an online session on that. Getting it into especially okay, so Komal, you've mentioned any topic are we teaching during online session, whether they are getting into it or not. Now, I know it's a difficult situation for smaller kids in terms of grade 1, 2, and 3. So the only way that you can engage with them is to ask them to do a task at home, which they would do in order to help their parents and relate numbers to it. So let's say, for example, if a child has helped their parents to pick up the utensils, or do the laundry of the house, or do anything, they must start numbering it, and then they must try and record that what is the kind of activity they've done and how are numbers related to it. I think in grade 1, 2, and 3, you need to only and only focus on number literacy as much as possible. They should know and realize that how the use of numbers is continuously going to happen across their life, and how are they actually experiencing it on a daily basis. Uh, Zainab, I think the perfect example of unitary methods as of today is definitely going to give children that if we all help our parents, we finish the work fast, and if we leave everything on one or two members of our family, it is going to take a little longer time. I think there's no other way in order to demonstrate unitary method at this point in time. But of course, there are other ways also. I mean, at least I'm talking from a practical point of view, but from a game point of view, you could give them playing with a few beads or something, and you could race with your mother, father, or anybody in a given period of time. So somebody gets more time, somebody gets less time. They could fill in number of beads, or they could rather use this. I mean, I have started cleaning all my wardrobes and everything, but if we had more number of people helping me, I could finish my work a lot more faster. That's just an easier way to make it a lot more easier. Yes, I will share the apps on the Facebook wall. Manjusha, how to plan an algebra session? Now, I've been speaking about it. Algebra as a topic can only and only succeed if you are able to justify why are children actually using a variable. Until and unless they don't understand that, the whole concept of algebra will never be clear. So it is very important that each and every child does get an opportunity to realize that in a particular situation what are the variables actually there. So if you could give them the example of let's say a general store at this point in time, what are the products he needs to have in his shop, which will be sold the most, and which is a top priority. So they will, based on that, they will create an equation, and based on that they will be in a better position to identify what would be the sales, because at the end of the day we all use algebra. We all use these concepts mainly to estimate and forecast what exactly can happen, or what would be an estimate cost, and that's very very important. um, Chaitali, yes, your favorite game of softball, but unfortunately, during this virtual session, it doesn't really work that well. You need a good group to actually have fun on that. Maybe another time we could discuss on that. Um, how to remove math phobia as a students? I mean, usually students have a phobia for the subject because they don't see where exactly it is related to them. So, until and unless we don't justify how exactly they are going to utilize these concepts, it's never really going to make sure for them, never going to make sense for them. um, okay, can you suggest an easy way to teach trigonometry, especially proving? Gurmeet ji, we will definitely do that. Okay, so Gurmeet ji, when you talk about trigonometry especially, what we are going to be looking at is giving them Jenga blocks. Tell them to form a triangle or a right angle triangle based on the number of blocks. The base could be 3 blocks or the base could be 2 blocks. They could choose that as per their choice, and then accordingly try and make sure they make a right angle triangle, and with the help of a thread they can start evaluating each and every angle that they have discussed or ever experienced. um, okay, now we have, is there any other easy enjoyable method to memorize mathematics tables? Well, Monica, the easiest way is try to focus on giving them an opportunity to see repeated addition. If at all they are focusing on repeated addition, it becomes a lot more easier. This is a simple thing. The one which I mentioned about the table tennis racket. When children do simple repeated addition, it's a lot more easier for them. But the minute they do repeated subtraction, becomes very difficult. So, say for example, they're doing a table of 2, and if they do repeated subtraction from 20, and they start going from 20, 18, 16 while they are playing, and until the ball does not drop. So 20, 18, 16, 14, 12, and then they make a mistake again, they need to start from 20. So that's the best way to memorize when they're doing tables. Okay, there are a lot of questions, unfortunately. Yes, since we're running out of time, I think we'll have to uh, quickly take a last few questions. Okay. Well, I think we will be running out of time if I see that. But right now, what we can do is we are planning to do a detailed webinar in collaboration with THT, which would be, the details would be shared with you guys very soon, and you will be getting an opportunity to avail a THT code also in terms of discount. But that's something which we will be launching it very soon. Raki and Teachers Help Teachers will be briefing you. It's going to be a program. There'll be two types of webinars. One would be based on your creative math, how you can conduct sessions based on live sessions, and the other would be based on how you can actually use the current scenario, wherein the way of the whole pandemic situation, how can we use like each and everything into converting mathematics, and how do you teach them various concepts of that right from grade 5th to 10th. We would love to work with your school and your team. Thank you so much everyone for your time on a Sunday. I appreciate all of your feedback. I'm very glad that all of you did contribute. I was not the only one who was contributing. Thank you so much everyone. You're most welcome. Nirmala ji, thank you. I think yes, it was good to interact and see how multiple ideas could actually come up. And if I think we can just document these comments, I think we are going to have an endless number of activities at this point in time. Thank you so much once again. I had a wonderful time. Hope you all have a safe Sunday, and stay safe. And yes, I don't think we should remind you, but today night at 9 o'clock we all have to support our PM by following his orders. And thank you so much once again. Yeah, I'm signing out. Bye bye.